Welcome back to Capital Tonight. I'm Susan Arbetter. New York's roads and bridges are not in great shape. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but there is data to back that statement up. The group TRIP, which is a national transportation research nonprofit, estimated this month that deficient roads and bridges cost New York drivers $28 billion a year in maintenance costs and wasted time. While the federal infrastructure bill will pay for a lot of upgrades, there are still gaps in what the state needs to get things back into good repair. Joining us with a snapshot of what is needed is Mike Ellendorf. He's the president and CEO of the Associated General Contractors of New York State. Mike, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Susan. Thank you.
So I would have thought that with the new infrastructure bill money from Washington that New York would be pretty flush. That's about $900 million a year for 5 years. What's going on? What's the context in which that will be spent on?
Sure. Yeah, well, look, at passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill is a big deal. First of all, it's bipartisan, and that is there's something to be said about it, right? Yeah. In this day and age that it was done in that way. And in the New York congressional delegation, Democrats and Republicans supported it. And it's a big deal for New York. There's a lot of stuff in the bill, but when we're talking about roads and bridges, it's a 52% increase in federal aid for roads and bridges to New York State. It's about $4.6 billion over the 5-year life of the bill. It comes out to about $900 million a year. And, building upon what the state of New York has already done in making its own investments while we've waited for the federal government to act, it creates really a singular opportunity this year to help bring our statewide network of roads and bridges back into a state of good repair, and that's what we'll be looking to see done in this budget.
So now, my understanding is that Governor Hochul's executive budget is also very generous when it comes to capital expenditures, things like DOT, but that it falls short somewhat on money to repair, maintain, construct, and improve roads and bridges. Can you explain?
Sure. Well, credit where credit's due. The governor obviously has put a big emphasis on infrastructure. Right. It's prominent not only in her State of the State address, but in her budget address, and it's prominent in her budget. There's a lot of broad-based infrastructure investment in the budget. There's an ambitious plan for building affordable housing, environmental infrastructure, clean energy infrastructure. So Governor Hochul gets it, and she deserves credit for that. On the DOT front, a lot of good news. She's proposed a 5-year, $32.8 billion DOT capital plan. It's a record level of funding overall. It's a 5-year plan, which is what we were hoping to see. It's fully funded, which is good news. She continues the record level of investment that the legislature brought forward the last couple budget cycles for local roads and bridges through things like CHIPS, the Emergency Winter Recovery Program, the new state touring routes program. All of that is in the executive budget. That's great news. We're really happy to see that. Where we think there's a little more work to be done is on what we call the core DOT capital plan. So that is basically the projects that the State Department of Transportation themselves lets to repair the roads and bridges that they maintain.
Okay.
And despite the growth we've seen in other areas, the core DOT program in the 5 years of the capital plan that's proposed here is actually lower every year than it is currently, and than it was last year. That's a little bit surprising. You may say, how can that be when the state is getting all this additional money? There's two things happening. There's a lot of big, what we call mega projects that are being funded in this plan.
I-81,
the Van Wyck, the Kensington out in Western New York and Buffalo. Great projects, important projects, transformational projects, but that's not where most New Yorkers spend their time.
No.
Right? Most New Yorkers are driving on the roads and bridges that are local assets that are being addressed through the investments that are going to local governments, but also through that core DOT capital plan. And even though we've seen new funding and additional funding over the last several years for the DOT program, we've also seen the worst decline in pavement conditions ever, like since they've been tracking them. And with a smaller core program, what we'll see at the end of that 5 years is even worse conditions, right? So
why would we have the worst paving conditions since they've been tracking it? I mean, don't we budget for paving?
We do, but not enough, right? I mean, what's happening right now is you have a paving cycle. So you have a period of years where you go out and you treat a road, or you repave a road, or you ultimately rebuild a road. That paving cycle now is longer than the life cycle of the material that's used on the roads, right? So it's sort of like if you have a carton of milk in the fridge and you decide you're only going to buy milk every few months, it's not going to work out very well.
No,
right?
You're going to have bad milk.
the same sort of thing is happening with the paving cycle. And, although we've made some progress, and, the governor's talking about a new Operation POP, Pave Our Potholes.
Yeah.
She talked about, her experiences having traveled the state probably more extensively than just about anybody else. Knowing all those potholes, they're there, right? You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be tripped to know that the condition of our roads is bad. And although there's a lot of good things in the executive budget's proposal to address those, we need to grow the DOT core program so that their assets move towards a state of good repair. And so we need to see more investment there.
All right, so let's talk about how much investment. What is it going to cost to get the system back in good repair?
Yeah, so we and our partners at Rebuild New York Now have done a needs-based assessment that's not based on what we would like to see, not based on a number that sounds like a round number. It's based on the metrics that DOT uses in terms of measuring their pavements and their cycles and things like that. We think the overall number over the 5-year period should be around $43 billion. So what we're talking about here basically is an additional $2 billion a year for the capital plan. Now, that's a lot of money to you and me, probably. Well, it's a lot of money to me. It's probably a lot of money to you, Susan, but who knows? Who knows how you're doing over there.
Oh, but, pocket change.
Okay, then maybe you can make a contribution. But, in the scheme of things, though, it's not a lot of money, right?
No.
To put it in perspective, last year with the leadership of Senator Tim Kennedy, who chairs the Senate Transportation Committee, Assemblyman Bill Magnarelli, who chairs the committee on the Assembly side, we saw like a 25% increase last year in the DOT capital plan. Now, that was pre-infrastructure bill, in the uncertainty of COVID, American Recovery Plan Act bailout of the state, and amidst real economic turmoil. All that's behind us. We have a 5-year infrastructure bill.
So about $10 billion is what we're looking for.
Over the course of 5 years. And by the way, the state has record surpluses right now, as far as the eye can see.
There are a lot of people who have their eye on those surpluses, Mike. We have to wrap it up there, but I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon before the budget is passed. Mike Ellendorf, President and CEO of the Associated General Contractors of New York State. So good to talk to you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.